Alright, let's continue with chapter 4. In this chapter, we're going to bake our normal maps inside of Maya down to our game model. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get this all set up and ready to rock and roll. Alright, so I'm going to take my game model now and I'm going to put the finishing touches on it. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it over and get it double-sided. So I'm just going to go and make sure from a side view that all my verts are lined up on the x0 x axis, or 0 z axis rather. I just want to make sure everything is zeroed out and lined up. Next, I'm going to just play it safe and freeze and reset my transformations. Now I'm going to go to duplicate special and duplicate this in a -1 scale in the z axis. So -1 on the z axis. This flips it around and gives us our nice backside right here. Alright, so what we got to do now is, here's a little trick I've learned along the way. What we got to do is we got to take our UVs now. So let's open up our UV texture editor. Right now our UVs are the same for each side. So if I select this model, my UVs are lined up right here. If I select our newly duplicated side, our UVs are still in the same spot. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the duplicated UVs over one grid. And remember, this grid repeats into infinity. So if we just scoot these UVs over to one side of the grid, they won't interfere with the UVs on this side, and it's just a nice way to keep your UVs nice and organized for your model. Okay, so to do that, we're going to select our newly duplicated back side of our model here. We're going to go to UV mode in our grid, and we're going to select all the UVs, and then we're going to go to our window, general editors, and we're going to go to script editor here. And in the script editor, in this little box right here, we're going to type in a mail command, and I'm going to bring it up right here. What we're going to do is we're going to type. There's branches falling on my roof right now. That's pretty scary. A lot of wind outside. We're going to type this poly edit UV into our script editor right here. So hopefully that was enough time me complaining about the branches for you to copy that down, because now we're going to just plug it into our script editor here. So I just cut and pasted in here, and then we're going to hold down Control and press Enter, and immediately all of our UVs get transferred over one spot over to our -x grid. And when I select both of them, I now have UVs in the same spot on either grid. Alright, now that we got that done and out of the way, let's go ahead and combine our model together. So let's go to Mesh, Combine, and I'm going to grab my vertices, select them all. You know this part by now. We'll just merge them. Okay. So now we have one complete model. So let's go into my outliner now. I'm going to delete some of these windows down here. Let's go to my outliner. We'll go to Edit, Delete All by Type, History. When I do that, I have a leftover empty group that has nothing in it, so I can just delete that. And I'm going to be sure to rename this new model Low Poly UV'd Mesh 001, because this is now UV'd and ready to rock and roll. I'm also going to drop this newly created mesh into my low poly layer, like so. So now I can hide it and bring it back when I need to. Alright, now we're going to set up my bake cage so we can transfer details from my smoothed model right here down to my low poly model we see right here. So I'm going to go ahead and show both of them. Alright. You know what, actually I'm going to, just show both of them for right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to rendering, our rendering menu right here. We have polygons, animation, those should be familiar. Well, here's the rendering. I'm going to actually bring back that outliner. I'll be needing it to make sure I select the right model. And we're going to go to lighting and shading, and we're going to go down to transfer maps. Okay. Very important that you follow along here and adjust your settings and listen to basically the reasons why I add these. I was just clearing this out from a bake I did earlier. Alright, so what do we see here? We have a transfer maps little menu here. Alright, let's go through it one at a time and I'll explain what we're looking at. Alright, our target mesh is our in-game model. This is the target mesh where I want all my detail rendered to. So we'll go into my outliner and I'll select my low poly UV mesh, because believe it or not, this is our actual game model we will be using. And we're going to go to add selected in our target meshes menu right here. Alright, so it loads up low poly UV mesh 001, and we're going to go to the display and we're going to set it to envelope. Okay, and what this does is it creates a pink envelope for us, and it replaces our low poly model for this kind of indicator, and this indicator is basically our projection shell around our model. Alright, I'll explain more about that in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and load in my smoothed high poly mesh here. Source mesh is what do you want to take and bake onto our target low poly mesh right here. What is the source of the information? I want my high poly model to be the source of all those nice edges and details I have right here. So I'm going to go and select high poly smoothed. You don't want to make the mistake and select the unsmoothed. You want to select the one that is our smooth, totally smoothed out model, and we will add that selected, and you don't have to do anything after that. Maya just looks and says, okay, high poly smooth mesh, that's what we're going to bake from. And now's a good time to go ahead and lock down our smooth layer so we can't accidentally select it. Alright, so let's go back to this envelope, okay? Originally, the default setting for our envelope right here is 0. Think of this pink shell as a UV projection type deal. You know, in the automatic map, it'll have all these blue planes on the top, bottom, left, right, back, and front. Well, this pink shell is basically where Maya starts erupting all these projection rays from the inside out. So we need to make sure that our projection or our search envelope, our pink shell here, encompasses our smoothed model fully. Okay, we can see here that we see a little bit of gray peeking through. We don't want that. We want the pink to encompass our high poly totally. So we can get a good starting point by going to search envelope, and I'm going to input 0.5 here. And what that does is it expands our pink envelope a little bit beyond it, so now we don't get so much weird distortion, because our pink envelope is a little bit bigger than our smooth model now. But we're still going to have to go in and hand edit some of these points, and we're just going to treat it like a normal model here. We're just going to grab the verts on this corner here, and we're going to pull them up and back, and then maybe scale them out a little bit. See, this is wrong. We don't want our model to peek through our pink envelope at all. So we want to scale it out so it's completely inside our pink envelope. And it doesn't have to be completely, you know, at a perfect angle. It can be a little skewed like that as long as it encompasses our high poly model. Now I see some places around here on these edges. I see a little bit of gray poking through here. So that just leads me to believe I need to spend a little time on these corners right here. So I'm going to just pull these out a little bit more, like so, just to make sure that my high poly mesh is totally inside my pink envelope here. Alright, so that looks like that took care of that. No more gray peeking through, that's perfect. And also looks like on the corners of the inside of this window, I need to adjust those corners a little bit. So let's go into my front view again, and we'll just grab our verts on the envelope and just pull them up like so. Maya is really powerful in the way it bakes like this because it allows you to really hand place how you want your bake projection to look. Alright, great. It is getting really windy outside. I'm a little scared. Alright, great. So if we go back into perspective view, I can give this another quick glance over, and we're good to go. Okay. I don't see any more gray peeking through. I just like to double check. Alright, great. We got a pretty good projection cage set up. So this pink envelope thing is often called the projection cage or the bake cage. It's basically Maya's indicator of where all the rays going to be projected from, pretty much. And since we're going to only project them from the inside of the pink cage, we want to make sure the gray high poly mesh is completely inside it. Alright, hopefully that explained a little bit. Alright, so we're just going to go down these settings now. The next thing we're going to look at is output maps, and we want to make a normal map. So let's go ahead and select normal. And right here we're going to select where we want to save our normal map. So I'm going to set mine on the desktop, and in our files type of file I want, let's make it a Targa, T-A-R-G-A, and we'll call this normal. Okay, let's call it normal geometry. I'll explain that in a second. I already have one, so just trust me on the normal geometry. That's going to be the first type of normal map we bake. We want to use Maya common settings. We want it to be tangent space. We want to include materials, and remember, we want to make sure that it's a Targa, so we can set it to Targa there. And we've set where we want to save it, the directory we want to save it at. You don't want to leave that blank because you might save it somewhere you don't know how to get to. Alright, we'll connect maps to our shader. Alright, let's go to Maya Common Output now. Let's make sure our map width is 2048 by 2048. Height and width 2048 pixels by 2048 pixels. We'll keep our aspect ratio checked. We'll transfer in world space. Our sampling quality, this is just depends on how, basically the quality of your normal map, how much resolution is given to it. So if you're not quite sure how your normal map's going to turn out, you can always pick low or preview. The higher the sample size or the filter size, or sampling quality rather, the longer it will take to render. So your test renders, to make sure you get a good bake, pick one of these low ones. When you're doing your final bake, set it on high. Alright, and everything else should be good to go. 3 filter size is good. Fill texture seams. Let's make this 7 or 8. Alright, this is going to be the amount of overlap the normal maps go over on your UV islands. So I can bring that up real quick, show you what I mean by it. So if I select my UV or my model here, your fill texture seams, if this is the edge of my model here, Maya is going to bake the normal map 8 pixels beyond it, so it'll continue to draw all the way out here. So it creates a nice buffer to make sure our normal maps work that much better. Alright, so I usually set that at 8 or so. Alright, so let's go to advanced options now, and there's something we need to know about this advanced options area. We want to make sure we bake inside the envelope only. We want to leave this at 0. Delete envelopes on bake. It depends on whether or not you want to keep working with it. If this is checked, it will delete our pink bake cage. If it's unchecked, it'll keep the pink bake cage even after we bake this out. Leave this unchecked until you're sure your normal map's going to bake cleanly. And then we have match using. Surface and geometry normals are both they're both useful, and I'll go over the differences right now. Luckily, I've already baked out my normal maps for this piece, so we don't have to wait on the time it'll take to bake. So normally you would pick geometry normals and press bake, but I've already done that because it can take around 15 to 20 minutes, at least on my laptop here, to get that going. So let's just go to my outliner and see the difference between geometry and surface bakes. Okay, So I'll go to polygons, I'll go to my outliner, and in my outliner I have low poly UV mesh envelope. I'm just going to delete that, and I want to bring back my low poly. Alright, it's a little invisible. What I can do now is, since the bake hid it, I'm going to open up my transfer maps, and I'm going to go to both, and there we go. Now I can just get rid of that envelope, and I'm left with my low poly model. And I'm going to plug in my normal maps on this mesh inside of Maya. And I can show us how we can do that right now. This will be a pretty important thing to learn. Alright, so I'm going to go to Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. And let's make a Lambert. And let's call this Normal Geo Map. Alright, so now we got to plug in our normal map here. So we'll go to Bump Mapping. We'll hit the little checker. We'll go to File. And what we want to do on the bump mapping is we want to go to Use As and set this to Tangent Space Normals. And then in our file, we want to go and browse where we saved our geometry normal. So I got mine right here, normal geometry right there. And now I can just transfer my new normal geometry material onto my model. And I press 5 on my keyboard and I get a nice blank shaded. Look what happens when I press 6 to activate my textures. I get a nice normal map bake. Notice when I switch between 5 and 6, what happens to these edges here. 5, we get these ugly hard edges here. 6, I get these nice flush edges. That's our normal map working for us right there. We retain these nice high poly edges, and they're really nice. But there is a problem with geometry bake sometimes. For these big flat surfaces, remember these recesses we had modeled in? Look at the way the normal map's describing this recess. It kind of skews the shadow here, right? It's not even all the way around. Alright? So geometry is good for getting our edges nicely baked. See how great these are, nice and beveled. The light gradually goes around the corners. But it's not so hot on getting information on big flat surfaces. Well, guess what is? Surface geometry bakes. So I usually like to bake both maps. So I'll go to surface normals now. And I've already made that map. So I'll just make a new material and I'll show you the difference between these. So we'll call this normal sur mat. And I'll go to bump mapping, checkerboard, file. I'll go to my bump 2D right here. I gotta set this to tangent space normals. And then I'll just plug in my normal surface here. And then I got to apply my normal surface here. And look what happens as soon as I drag and drop this material onto my model. Look right here what happens. Ooh, nice. It fixed that problem. Now these recesses are nice and even. But we run into a problem on our edges now. We get these ugly seams around our edges. Okay? Nice and ugly seams around our edges. So I found that the best workflow to get the best of both worlds is basically bake both maps and then combine them in Photoshop. That way we get these nice, clean, recessed normal maps here. They're not skewed or uneven. See, this is what it looks like with geometry versus surface. And this is what the edges look like with surface versus geometry. So this is surface. See how these nice seams are making our model look not too good? Well, when I put my geometry on there, it gets rid of them. So that's the difference between these two maps. Alright, so you should have both your maps baked out. And when you go into Photoshop, they should look something like this. Here's our normal surface, TGA. Alright, we can see right here that the normal maps for my recess are nice and even all the way around. But look what they look like with geometry. See how you can see that skewing of the information? This versus that. Not too good sometimes. Alright, so that does it for normal baking. In the next chapter, we'll set up our Photoshop and get started with a UV setup, basically making a snapshot of our UV map, importing that into into Photoshop, importing our normal maps into Photoshop, and setting up our PSD file to get ready to start texturing our model. Thanks.